because human genius has now destroyed the impediment of the terrestrial radio.
Boston Herald Radio.
Boston Herald Radio.
This is Boston Herald Radio. It's The Money Show with Rick Schaefer and Susan Kaplan.
Welcome back. Hour number 2 of today's version of the Best Money Show on radio, or as John Sapichetti likes to call it, the real Money Show Hour. Joining me today, as I've been promising you all week, is Rich Rosa, who is an attorney and one of the founders of Buyers Brokers Only LLC. He's also a buyer's broker at Buyers Brokers Only LLC. In the interest of full disclosure, I should mention that Buyers Brokers Only LLC is an advertiser here on Boston Herald Radio, and we're very happy to have them as such. Rich, we'll get into specifics about Buyers Brokers in a bit, but quickly, give us an overview of your career and how you came to be to found Buyers Brokers Only LLC.
Sure. As you said, I am a lawyer. My undergraduate degree is from Northeastern University. I graduated from the School of Journalism in 1991. I graduated from law school in 1995, Newland School of Law. Mm-hmm. I'm admitted to practice law in the state of Massachusetts and the state of New Hampshire, and practiced law for about 10 years, mainly in trial work, and I founded Buyers Brokers Only in 2005.
Did you do a lot of real estate trial work, or did you just decide to make a total change?
It was total change. I mean, I did do some real estate. I represented some buyers and sellers, never conveyance, never for banks. Okay. But I did do a little bit of real estate, but it was a pretty big change, yeah. Explain
what a buyer's broker is, because although, and as I've told you, I used to not be a big fan of them. Now I am a big fan of of hiring a buyer's broker, especially an exclusive buyer's broker. But a lot of people, when they go to sell a home, they at least think about getting a broker. But a lot of people, when they go to buy a home, don't think about getting a buyer's broker. So explain what they are, and we'll go into this in greater detail later. But why it's so important to have one? Sure. Well, the seller is going to have a listing agent, the seller's broker. That listing agent is going to look out for the best interest of the seller. A buyer wants to have somebody in their corner, someone who's got their back, someone who's going to represent their best interest when it comes to buying the house. So it's really important to have someone who's going to do that for you. And also somebody who knows the process. Certainly. Knows the process, knows how to price houses. There's lots of things to know that a buyer broker could help you with. I mean, the old saying is, it's not what you don't know, it's what you don't know you don't know. Right. And there's a lot of that in buying real estate. In the past, a lot of people have been hesitant to hire buyers brokers because there was confusion as to how they got paid. How do buyers brokers or buyers agents who represent a buyer get paid? And has it just become the way business is done, or is there actual law that says how they get paid? Well, what happens is someone wants to sell their house. They contact a listing agent. That listing agent and the seller agree on a commission. In Massachusetts, it's almost always 4 or 5%. Right. When that house is listed for sale on the MLS, there's what's called a cooperating commission. It's usually half, although it doesn't have to be. Sometimes the commission might be 5% and the selling agent is only offering 2%. Mm-hmm. But in any event, only offering 2% to another broker. 2% to the buyer broker, correct. Right. But in any event, that is already predetermined as soon as the house goes on the market. So really, negotiation of commissions isn't something that has to take place when you use a buyer agent. I think a lot of people are concerned that maybe the commission's being negotiated along with the price of the house, and that's almost never the case. Now, can a buyer's agent legally charge their client a fee over and above the commission that they're going to get? Absolutely. In fact, some buyer agents will say that they'll have their buyers sign a contract that says that they're going to get 2.5%. So if that house that buyer purchases is only 2%, that buyer agent is going to require that
buyer to pay the 0.5% difference. Now, that's how some people do it. At our company, we take whatever cooperating commission is offered. We never charge our clients any money.
I'm gonna. Well, it's not really, devil's advocate. I agree with you 100%. If I were a buyer and went to not buyers brokers only, but went to a buyer broker and they said they wouldn't take whatever they're going to get, and the buyer had to pay anything, I'd walk out the door and say goodbye. I don't think that was my big problem with buyers brokers in the past. So, but I would take it 90 to 95% of buyers brokers now do it the way that you guys do.
I can't say for sure,
okay.
But I do know that it's certainly some people are doing it the way we do it. Some people want that percentage. I've even heard of some people ask for a retainer up front. So if the buyers didn't buy a house, they would get something. But like I said, we don't do any of that. We represent people, and whatever we get as a cooperating commission, that's what we get.
Same as with the seller's agent. If the seller puts it on the market and it doesn't sell, and the contract runs out, then that's the way the business is.
Exactly.
There's a difference between a designated buyer's agent and an exclusive buyer agent. I know you guys are exclusive buyer agents. Explain what the difference is and why it's so important. And I agree with you on this, that if you're going to get a buyer's broker, which I think you should get an exclusive buyer's broker.
In Massachusetts, there's two types of buyer agents. Like you said, there's a designated buyer agent and an exclusive buyer agent. A designated buyer agent works at a real estate firm that also takes listings. So, for instance, that buyer agent could also have listings of his or her own, or certainly there could be listings in the company that he or she works for. The issue with that is if you're working with a designated buyer agent and you like a house that agent is listing, that agent is going to become a dual agent. They're going to represent both you and the seller for the purchase of that house. And obviously there's inherent conflicts of interest that go along with that. Further, even if the listing you like isn't being listed by your particular designated buyer agent, someone in their firm, their brokerage may be listing that property. So again, you have a conflict of interest. And in some cases, firms are providing additional compensation or bonuses of some sort to designated buyer agents who are selling properties that are being listed in-house. So there's certainly some conflict of interest that goes along with that. With exclusive buyer agents like our firm, we don't list any property. I don't allow my brokers to list any property. So there's never an issue of us trying to get our clients to buy something that I'm listing or that someone in my firm is listing because we have no listings.
Do you know offhand, and if you don't, it's fine, but do you know offhand either nationally or at least in New England or Massachusetts, what percentage of buyers now hire buyer's agents?
I suspect that in Massachusetts, it's probably about 80%.
Really?
However, those are mostly designated buyer agents.
Oh, okay.
There's probably less than 100 exclusive buyer agents in the whole state.
Is that do you see that growing? Because frankly, I think that's the way it should go. But.
Well, our company's growing,
yeah, okay.
But I think I agree with you. I think it is the way to go. And frankly, I'm surprised someone hasn't come along and done a seller only company and just represent sellers.
Everything's getting more specialized these days, so I agree with you on that. Give us a couple of more reasons why people would want to get a buyer's broker. For example, you've talked about we've talked about when a buyer goes to an open house, how a buyer's broker can be of lots of help to them. Sure.
Well, first and foremost, sort of a buffer between the agent who's at the open house, who represents the seller and who has a fiduciary responsibility to the seller, and so what a lot of people don't understand is when they go to these open houses on their own and they start, engaging in what seems like innocent conversation with the agent who's at the open house, that agent represents the seller. And when you start saying things like, my spouse's job is relocating to Massachusetts and we really got to get into a house in the next 60 days, you're giving that agent information that they have an obligation to pass on to the seller, which is going to make your negotiations harder. Mm-hmm. And there's lots of ways for...
Or just if you showed, if you were excited about it, then the the listing broker is going to know that and is going to tell the seller, which will mean the seller might be more wouldn't be as flexible in the negotiation.
Absolutely. And also, a good buyer's agent really knows about houses, and so is going to be there with you, explaining to you the good, the bad, and the ugly, as I like to say, when it comes to houses. People walk into a house and they get caught up in, what the kitchen looks like and what the bathroom looks like, but I like to spend time looking at the roof and looking at the heating system, and does the place have gutters, and how's the, the chimney look, and the siding, and what about the windows and things like that. So
whereas you're not going to tell somebody definitively don't make an offer, you may say, well, you may want to consider these things. So someone may not make an offer where they would have, and then basically say you're saving them the hassle and the money of hiring an inspector and then having to back out of the deal because they didn't spot things that were major red flags, but you did spot them.
Right, and like you said, it's you want to take these things into consideration when you make an offer, because people have this idea sometimes that after the home inspection, they're just going to give the seller a list of things that was wrong with the house, and the seller is going to either fix them or give them money, and that's typically not the case.
No, it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way, and so you want to go into the making your offer having some good idea of what are some of the things that need to be changed. And as a matter of fact, sometimes I do tell people don't buy this house.
Okay.
Sometimes it is that bad.
We have to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about buyers brokers only specifically, and some other information that you've prepared, which is going to be very valuable to our listeners. You're listening to the second hour of today's version of the Best Money Show on radio, the Real Money Show Hour, right here on Boston Herald Radio.
Look at the bike lanes crisscross haphazardly through traffic in Kenmore Square, and you're rightfully bewildered and maybe a little upset. Stay calm. We'll figure it out. We are the Boston Herald. Now, The Money Show with Rick Schaefer and Susan Kaplan.
Welcome back to hour number 2 of actually we're in the middle of hour number 2 of today's version of the Best Money Show on radio. My guest today is Rich Rosa, who is a founder and one of the brokers at Buyers Brokers Only LLC. Let's talk about Buyers Brokers Only LLC in particular. When was it established, and give us a little history of how it got established and then grew?
Sure. We started the company in 2005, myself and my business partner, Dave Kress. Dave was actually a law clerk of mine when he was in law school. And when he graduated, I suggested to him that he might want to get his real estate broker's license. And he did, and he did quite well, actually, the first year. And we started talking about starting a company just represent home buyers. And sort of the way the conversation went is we just felt like the industry was very seller focused, and we wanted to sort of try to level the playing field for home buyers, and that's sort of how the idea was born. And we started Buyers.
What year was that?
2005.
Okay, so you've gone through the difficult times as well.
Yes, I mean we started in November 2005. So shortly after we started, the market started to sort of disintegrate.
Yeah, right. That's a good word for it.
And then maybe about 6 or 7 years ago, we brought on our first broker, and as of right now, we have about 24 of us altogether.
And what geographic areas do you cover?
We cover the whole greater Boston area. Matter of fact, this week we're adding a broker who's in Falmouth, so we're going to cover the Upper Cape, all of the South Shore, all the way out to Worcester County, and up to southern New Hampshire.
So you have some brokers who are licensed in New Hampshire as well?
Yes, 3 of them, yeah.
Okay.
One is in Portsmouth. My business partner Dave is licensed there, and another broker who's in Dunstable who covers Nashua in that area.
So from your answer, I assume that if somebody comes to your office, to you, for example, but they want to buy in southern New Hampshire, you're going to refer them to the broker who works that area and is most knowledgeable of that area.
Sure, and most people, that's how it works. They contact the office, and depending on where they tell us they're looking for a home, we put them in touch with that particular broker.
All the brokers at Buyers Brokers LLC are attorneys, which I think is a great idea. But how did you come up with that decision that only attorneys could work as brokers for Buyers Brokers Only LLC?
When we first started the company, Dave and I were obviously both attorneys, and so when we decided to start adding brokers to the company, we thought that it would be a good idea to just keep it as attorneys only,
Mm-hmm.
and try to keep a high level of professionalism and people that sort of, real estate's an industry where it's good to have someone who dots the I's and crosses the T's, and that's kind of what lawyers do.
Along those lines, two questions. If you want to join Buyers Broker, you have to be an attorney. Do you A, have to be an attorney in Massachusetts? B, do you have to be an attorney who specialized in real estate, or you just have to be an attorney?
You just have to be an attorney. I mean, all of our attorneys are either licensed in Massachusetts or New Hampshire, but technically you wouldn't have to be licensed in either one of those states as long as you were an attorney. Because we're not practicing law.
But like yourself, you don't. The attorney doesn't necessarily have to have specialized in real estate. They can have specialized in any area.
That's correct, and we give our new brokers training and that sort of thing.
We were talking earlier about the fact that you don't charge any. You get paid out of the commission that the seller's paying, but you take it a step further. You actually offset the cost of the buyers hiring their own real estate attorney. Is that correct?
That's true. We provide a small rebate after closing. It's based on the price of the house. It's either $200, $350, or $500, and we do that because we think it is so important that buyers get a attorney to represent them. And so that's why we do that.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I'm not just saying that because you're a client, an advertiser. I've been saying that for the 25 years I've been doing the Money Show. To me, buying a home is, for 90% of people, the biggest expense, the biggest purchase they're going to make. To not have an attorney represent you when you're going to be spending a quarter, a half, $750,000, it's so penny wise and dollar foolish. It makes no sense to me.
Well, going back to what we were just talking about, it's always been a seller focused industry, and the documents that are used, what's referred to as the standard purchase and sale agreement, is very slanted towards the seller. It's slanted towards getting the deal done, and a good real estate attorney is going to add an addendum to that, or sometimes it's called a rider, to that document, that purchase and sale agreement, and sometimes that's a 4 or 5 page addendum with 25 additional paragraphs.
My addendum is oftentimes longer than the boilerplate purchase and sale agreement.
Absolutely, and it's vital. I mean, there's so many paragraphs that need to be altered to protect the buyer's interest.
It's almost a joke at this point because a lot of attorneys will represent both buyers and sellers. And when I usually represent buyers when I'm representing someone, and I'll call the seller's attorney, and they've already made changes to half of the paragraphs because they, for example, on the if the buyer defaults, then the only recourse the seller usually has is to retain the deposit. The document, the boilerplate you're talking about, doesn't read that way, but every seller's attorney in the world agrees to that. So it's gotten to the point of being absurd. They should just change the document so that it's for both buyers and sellers. But there is another reason why someone really should have a buyer's broker. In fact, I assume you not only refund money for people to get a good real estate attorney, but you'll also refer people to good real estate attorneys, property inspectors, and the like. We
actually, right at the beginning of the process, we actually give them a list of about 7 or 8 attorneys right from the beginning and say, when you get to that point, here are 7 or 8 attorneys that we recommend. They're not required to use those attorneys, obviously, but people want recommendations, so we provide that. Same with home inspectors. In fact, what we do for our clients is when an offer is accepted, we immediately send out an email, and that email has a link in it to a web page that we've created that has lots and lots and lots of information about home inspections, videos, links to different state sites to get different information about home inspections, and then at the bottom of that page we recommend about 8 or 10 different home inspectors.
So you're really not only representing the buyer, but you're trying to educate them on the process.
Absolutely.
Because the more knowledge they have, the better they're going to do, and also they're going to make better choices and feel more comfortable about it. Most buyers are especially first-time home buyers, are very nervous.
Yes, yeah, and that's really what that's really kind of the client that we get anyway, is the type of person who, does a lot of research, wants to learn, and that's how they end up finding us to begin with.
You also, Buyers Brokers Only has a free homes for sale email alert.
Yes.
Explain what that is.
Yeah, sure. Anyone could come to our website and request a customized MLS account, and that account gets the feed directly from the actual MLS in Massachusetts, which is based out of Shrewsbury. So it's updated every 24 hours, and they'll get an email every morning telling them not only new properties that come on the market that meet their specific search criteria, but also when prices drop on any property that meets their specific search criteria.
So now this is not only for clients, but for anybody. Is that correct? This
is for anybody who wants it. And in fact, what's important about this is that there's a lot of national websites out there that aren't associated with any MLS that provide, listings. The issue with some of these websites is they're very good about putting houses on the market. They're not very good about taking them off when they're sold. So a lot of times if you're looking at these national sites, you're getting information that's outdated. For example, with the MLS in Massachusetts, a house is either active or contingent or under agreement. When it goes under agreement, it's completely removed from the MLS. But when it's contingent, you could still see it, but it's basically off the market.
Kind of a waste of your time.
Well, it's off the market. They're probably not even going to show it at this point. These national websites have no mechanism by which to remove those contingent properties. So many times you're looking at properties that already have accepted offers.
And what a lot of people don't realize is one of the difficulties of buying a home, or selling a home, but certainly buying a home, is the time. I mean, the buyer, even if they hire, and again, I think they should hire a buyer's broker, they're going to have to spend a lot of time certainly going to look at properties. But one of the things I'm assuming you can do is cut that time down by, you go through the different documents and the different places online where you can figure out what's on the market and what the buyer should go look at and what's really going to be a waste of their time.
Sure, and every situation is different. Every buyer's a little bit different. What I typically tell people is we could sit and talk for hours about what they want, but until I actually go see a couple of houses with them, then I get a much better idea of what they're really looking for, and then I could really sort of help them narrow it down. And one thing I do tell people sometimes is, if they can anyway, they should try to narrow down to 2 or 3, cities or towns that they're looking in, because then they really get to know those areas well. And when something hits the market, they'll know, just like me, that, hey, this is something I really want to go see. But if you're looking in 10 or 12 places, you never really get a good grasp of that particular market.
I would assume in some cases, too, you take a buyer to 3 or 4 places and you say, no, this isn't good enough, this isn't good enough, and you have to sit them down and say, if you want what you consider good enough, you're going to have to spend more money.
Right,
or consider a different geographic area.
And especially with first-time home buyers, they're quite surprised what a small move in price range will do to change the house. For example, if you're in a $350,000 price range, let's say, houses that are $375,000 are quite frankly going to be quite nicer than $350,000 or $340,000, and people are surprised by that. Certainly, if you're up around $800,000, then $30,000 or $40,000 or $50,000 doesn't make that much difference. But when you get down below $400,000 for a house, $25,000 sometimes can make a big difference in what you're going to get for a house.
We have to take another break. We'll come back with our conversation with Rich Rosa. When we come back, we're going to talk about the market in general in the greater Boston area, right here on the Best Money Show on radio, on Boston Herald Radio.
At the BU Bridge, a boat can sail under a train, driving under a car, driving under an airplane. And of course, you can get your Herald in print, online, video, and radio stream, and on air. Synergy, kind of. Now, The Money Show with Rick Schaefer and Susan Kaplan.
Welcome back to The Money Show. My guest this hour is Rich Rosa, who is a founder and one of the agents at Buyers Brokers Only, LLC. We're going to talk a little bit about the real estate market. And the one thing that most people realize is that demand is far outrunning supply, but a lot of people don't realize how much that is. What's the state of the real estate market today in the greater Boston area?
Well, in Massachusetts as a whole, the latest statistics came out for the April market on May 27th, and according to the Massachusetts Association of Realtors, sales were down 5.9%, and that's attributed to the lack of inventory. Of course, since demand outstrips supply, prices have gone up, and they went up 2.3% in April, and this is for single-family houses. Inventory has been dropping quite a bit. For single-family houses, it's declined 39 straight months, and for condos, 54 straight months.
Because there's such a high demand, people are buying properties, but other properties aren't coming on the market to take their place, correct?
Exactly. It's kind of a catch-22. There are some sellers out there that would like to sell their property, but they're hearing about how tight inventory is, and they're afraid that their house is going to sell in a few days, and they're not going to be able to find something quick enough to move.
I would assume in this market you would advise people to buy a home first and then put your house on the market. Chances are you're going to be able to sell it pretty quickly.
Or at least have it on the market, because in this market, very few sellers are going to accept an offer from someone who needs to sell a house and doesn't even have it on the market.
Right. How much has inventory actually declined?
Well, what I did was I put together some statistics for you for today, and what I did was I compared today's inventory to 4 years ago. So on June 4th, 2011, let's just take condominiums in Somerville. There were 148 listings on June 4th, 2011. There are only 29 today. In Jamaica Plain, it was 147 condos, only 41 today. And in Arlington, there was 73 4 years ago today, and only 15 today. Single family is not much different. In Hanover, which is on the South Shore, 78 listings is down to 40. Acton, 105 down to 49. And in Melrose, there were 84 4 years ago and only 32 today.
Two questions, and I don't know if you know the answer to the first. Is this demand far outreaching the supply a greater Boston or Massachusetts phenomena, or have you looked to see if that's the phenomena across the country or in lots of other markets around the country?
I'm hearing in certain states it is. For example, from what I've read, it doesn't appear that Connecticut's real estate market is nearly as hot as Massachusetts. But I have heard that in places like some places in California and in certain places in Texas, southern Florida, South Florida, it's the same situation.
Now, my feeling is people keep saying the real estate market's coming back and it's very healthy. I don't think that this is the sign of a healthy market. It's a hotter market, but to me, unless the demand and supply are relatively in sync, they're never always equal. But when they're relatively in sync, that's when you have the best real estate market, when prices are where they should be and properties are selling relatively quickly, but not the day after they go on the market.
That was 2012. In my opinion, the bottom of the market was probably the second half of 2011. And what you just described was exactly what 2012 was like. Prices went up very, very little, but there was plenty of houses on the market, plenty of buyers, and it wasn't until 2013 we started getting into this shortage of inventory. The industry feels that about 6 months of inventory is the balance. In 2009, 2010, there were cities and towns that had, 9, 10, 11 months of inventory, so clearly it was a buyer's market. There are some neighborhoods in Boston now where there is less than 1 month of inventory. So it's
definitely a seller's market.
It is clearly a seller's market.
Give us some of the problems or situations that's come out of this low inventory. I assume bidding wars are one of them.
Well, bidding wars are quite common. I would say in the last 2.5 years or so, 70% of the offers that I make are multiple offer situations. So, there's a lot of a lot of advice you have to give home buyers when they're in that situation. No one wants to be in a bidding war. Obviously, if there's more than one offer, chances are that someone's going to pay more than they would have paid if they were the only one making the offer. But what's important for people to know is that when you are in those situations, very often you're only going to get one shot. There's not going to be a negotiation. Many times what's happening today, if a listing agent knows that they have a listing in a hot neighborhood and they're going to get a lot of activity, they might put the house on the market on a Thursday, have open houses on Saturday and Sunday, and tell everyone they're going to review offers at 5 o'clock on Monday.
But on the other hand, doesn't it create situations where buyers, especially if they've been looking for a while, start getting they start making offers on houses that they really shouldn't because they're getting nervous?
I couldn't agree more. I think that they get caught up in the emotion of it. They've been outbid several times. They feel like they just have to go way over asking. And maybe sometimes it's justified, but what I always tell my clients is, if you like the house, let's do a comparative market analysis. Let's do some research. Let's see what it's worth, and then make an offer based on that. And I think what's happening, and this is not something that a lot of people are talking about, but I see it more and more, is a lot of these houses are coming on the market. They're getting multiple offers. They're selling right away. And then lo and behold, a couple of weeks later, they're back on the market. And the listing agents will say things like, well, the home inspection went well, but the buyers were, making unreasonable demands or something like that. But what I think is really happening is they jumped into this too quickly. They made an offer well over asking price, and after sort of stepping back and looking at what they did, they realized they overpaid. And I think they're using the home inspection as an excuse to get out. So that's why it's important to have a buyer's agent who's going to really say to you, okay, let's think rationally about this and what this house is really worth.
Or if the buyer, if you obviously talk to the buyers about what they can afford, and the buyer says, well, and they say, I'll make an offer $30,000, $40,000 more than I had set my limit at, and you have to bring them back down to earth and say, can you really afford that? Can you afford the extra down payment? Can you afford the extra amount that you're going to have to pay per month, and so on and so forth?
And is the house going to appraise for that?
Exactly.
Because, depending on how much of a down payment they're putting, if the house doesn't appraise, that might be the end of the loan.
Exactly.
The less you're putting down, the more likely the appraisal is going to have an impact. And I'll give you an interesting situation, with a situation where I had a feeling the buyers who got the house were going to back out. I had a client who is looking to relocate from out of state. And this particular client liked a house that was on the North Shore. And this client had cash to pay for the house. And we got to the house, and as soon as we got there, I got a text message from the listing agent, it's been sold. The house needed quite a bit of work, but my client was not worried about that. My client was prepared to do that work. And I'm not a big fan of backup offers, but I told my client, I said, this house needs a lot of work, and it's not really priced all that competitively. I think we should make the cash backup offer at a price that you think is reasonable based on the work you're going to have to do, because I got a feeling this is going to come back on the market. Lo and behold, I got an email just 2 days ago, 11 days after we made the backup offer. Those buyers did back out, and my client got the property.
We've got about 4 minutes before we have to take another break, but I know you wanted to touch on this. Give some tips to people, home buyers who want to purchase new construction. And I'm not talking about people going to buy the land and construct themselves, because I frankly think people are crazy to do that. But even that there are tips to people who are going to buy a property that's being built by a contractor now.
Absolutely. When you negotiate new construction, it's a little bit different from negotiating an existing home. If a developer is building an 8, 10, 12 house subdivision somewhere, they're going to be less likely to negotiate on price, especially if there's a number of houses left to be sold, because once they negotiate down with you, that's going to be the ceiling for the next buyer that comes along. So you really want to negotiate on upgrades with developers on new construction, because they could give you these upgrades and no one has to know about it. They could tell the next buyer, I got full price for the house. They're not necessarily going to know that the developer gave you more hardwood floor or upgraded appliances or a larger lighting allowance. But the important thing...
Plus, if you make the... but if you make the upgrades after you've agreed on a price, any change orders usually cost you a lot more.
Absolutely. And what's important, and this is the mistake I think a lot of people make with new construction is they go in, they go see a place, they talk to the builder, they say they'd like this, 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 and this, and the builder says, yes, I'll do all of that. But they've never found out from the builder what his intentions were to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So he's given you upgraded appliances, he's given you a larger lighting allowance, but now what he's doing is he's giving you a lower grade window.
Yeah.
Maybe the 96% efficient heating system's now becoming a 90% efficient. So it's really important that you know the very specifics of what that builder is going to do prior to your negotiations. Another thing that's important is what builders tend to skip. People get caught up in what's the countertops going to be like, what are the cabinets going to be like. Builders are famous for leaving off gutters. Yeah. They're not even that expensive. But I just had a client buy new construction, and I made sure I put gutters in the offer, and the builder agreed to do it. And when we were at the final walkthrough the other day, we were looking around the neighborhood, and there was only about, a subdivision that had about 40 houses, only about maybe a quarter of them had gutters.
Very quickly, explain the importance of having 2 inspections basically on new construction?
Sure. If you're buying new construction and they're at the very early stages, let's say pouring the foundation, you might want to have the home inspector inspect it when the studs are up, and then inspect it again when it's done, because that's a chance for the home inspectors to sort of see behind the wall, something they could never do with an existing house. And
you always have to do a walkthrough, because contractors never finish everything by. There's always going to be a punch list. Which for the people who haven't been in real estate is a list of things that you agree, and usually, oftentimes, the buyer can hold back money in escrow that the seller contractor doesn't get paid until they've finished everything that they haven't done. Especially if they're doing 20 houses, they'll leave stuff in your house that you want done.
And what I tend to do with clients with new construction is not only have the home inspection and the final walkthrough, but I like to do a preliminary final walkthrough about a week before the closing to go through that punch list, hopefully to get it done for the closing, because you know how it gets at the closing table. The builder doesn't want money held back. The buyer wants money held back. And so if you could try to get that stuff done, then you save everybody the headache.
We have to take a break. We'll come back and finish up with our guest, Rich Rosa from Buyers Brokers Only LLC, right here on the Best Money Show on radio, on Boston Herald Radio.
Now, The Money Show with Rick Schaefer and Susan Kaplan.
Welcome back. My guest this hour is Rich Rosa, who is founder and one of the agents at Buyers Brokers Only LLC. What type of feedback have you guys gotten from places like Angie's List and the like?
We have more than 85 5-star reviews on Yelp. And on Angie's List, we've earned the Super Service Award 2010, 12, 13, and 14.
So you guys are doing well. And the thing that's most impressive to me is that you started the business back in 2000, just before the market fell off a cliff, and you've not only survived that, but expanded from 2 brokers to how many brokers you have now?
Soon we'll have 26.
Which is, I mean, if you can do it through the hard times, and this is a hard time now too, because you get buyers, but finding them a property to buy is not easy because the supply is so low. How long in the contract? If someone signs a contract with Buyers Brokers Only LLC, how long is the contract for?
In fact, we don't require a contract.
Okay, so they can walk anytime they want.
Our philosophy has always been that those contracts are there basically to lock people in to work with someone for a certain amount of time. Our feeling is that we give every client 110%, but if they don't feel it's a good fit, they should be free to go, and they shouldn't have to feel like they owe us anything after the fact.
So they don't have to sign a contract for your loyalty. You basically earn their loyalty.
Absolutely. I mean, there are a few things that have to be signed. The state requires a disclosure form be signed telling the consumer what kind of real estate agent you are, and then we have an internal disclosure that simply says, hey, we're all attorneys attorneys, but we're not giving you legal advice.
In the past, some sellers brokers have been hesitant to deal with buyers brokers for any number of reasons. Do you find that at all anymore?
Not at all. Not at all. And the reason is because so many of the firms have listing agents who are also designated buyer agents, and they're all working together. So it's become the norm.
But explain again, or bring home the reason why, if somebody's going to hire a buyer's broker, they really should get an exclusive buyer's broker.
To put it simply, it's all about 100% loyalty.
Okay.
As exclusive buyer agents, we're 100% loyal 100% of the time. We're never dual agents. We're never designated agents. We're never going to put you in a situation where you want to buy a house that either I'm listing or someone in my firm is listing, because we don't list property for sale. So we avoid those conflicts of interest.
Give us some of the questions that buyers should be asking and that they can depend on a good buyer's agent to remind them to ask. Things like days that the property's been on the market and loan commitment dates and things like that.
Sure. I mean, there's a number of questions that I ask for clients, especially when they're interested in a property. You ask certain types of questions if you're looking at a single family home. You ask different questions if you're looking at a condominium. Typically with any home, I'm asking the listing agent, first, do they have a seller's disclosure? In Massachusetts, it's not required that a seller fill out a disclosure form about the property, so I always ask if there's one. I always, if it's not readily available, I'm always asking what's the age of the roof, what's the age of the heating system. If things were upgraded or remodeled, I ask when it was done, were there permits pulled, things like that.
Talk about the importance, and talk about the assessed value versus the appraised value of a property, because a lot of people get confused about that. Some people make an offer based on what the town assesses it at, which is a big mistake.
It is. The assessed value has really zero relationship to the market value. Sometimes the assessed value is over what a property is listed for. Sometimes it's under. But what people need to understand is the assessed value is the price that the city or town is using to tax that piece of property. It's funny because, real estate agents really do know that there's no correlation between market value and assessed value. But very often listing agents will put a house on the market, and if for some reason the assessed value is over their listing price, they'll be, touting it as, price below the assessed value. But they know that there's really no correlation.
In 200, actually, I say 200 words, in as many words as you want, but we have about 5 minutes, and I want you to get in your phone number and everything. Tell people why, if they're hiring a buyer's agent, if they're buying a home, which I totally agree they should, and they should hire an exclusive buyer agent, why they should go to Buyers Brokers Only LLC.
We have a philosophy at the company, and I tell all the brokers that start with me. The way to succeed is to do what's in the best interest of your client every time, even if it means more work and less money. It pays off. That's how we've grown the business. That's how we've gotten more 5-star reviews on Yelp than any other real estate company in the state. It's why we've won the Angie's List Super Service Award 4 times. It's why our past clients come back to us. It's why they refer their friends and family. We just do what's right. We treat everyone the same, whether they're buying an $800,000 house or a $80,000 1-bedroom condo. It's just really doing what's best for our clients is how we operate.
Where do you find $80,000 1-bedroom condo?
Well, not near Boston.
Right, that's what I meant. You got to go.
But I have found people. Condos under $100,000. Not anytime recently, but back when the market was sort of, disintegrating as we described it earlier.
You have to go pretty far outside of Boston to find one.
You sure do, yeah.
Certainly, especially if you want a place that's over, let's say, 200 square feet.
Right.
Give people your phone number and your website and how best to get in contact with you guys.
Sure. They could call 978-835-5906, 978-835-5906. Our website is buyersbrokers, buyersbrokersonly.com. On the website, they could click on Our Brokers right at the top of the page, and they could see all the brokers that we have, the locations that they cover. They could get their email addresses, their phone numbers. Again, that's buyersbrokersonly.com. They could also find us on Facebook. They could follow me on Twitter at RichRosa. Yeah, that's how they could find us.
Give us the phone number again.
978-835-5906.
I want to quickly remind everybody that the wise consumer is the informed consumer. So before buying, selling, renting, refinancing, or signing any real estate-related agreement, or before making any major money decision whatsoever, it's always best to speak with and take the advice of a qualified attorney, accountant, and/or you can find a good one or a great one. Just my co-host Susan Kaplan, a financial planner. I don't have time to give you all the information, but if you don't follow Susan and I on Twitter, you should. My Twitter address is at rschaefer1, SHAFFER, and Susan's is at skaplan, KAPLAN 111. And give your Twitter address again.
It's at RichRosa, ROSA.
And I want to thank Christian Burgoyne for doing a great job, and John Sapichetti in the Sports and Money hour of the Money Show. Before we end for the day, give us all the contact information one more time.
Sure. Phone number for Buyers Brokers Only LLC is 978-835-5906.
One more time.
978-835-5906. And our website is buyersbrokersonly.com.
Okay, that's buyersbrokersonly.com. Rich Rosa, pleasure to speak with you as always. You're a wealth of information. We love having you here as an advertiser, because I get to talk to you about real estate, and you just are a wealth of information on that. You'll be back again. I'll be back tomorrow at 4 with John Sapichetti. Again, our thanks to Christian Burgoyne. For John Sapichetti, myself, Rick Schaefer, Rich Rosa, and Christian Burgoyne, you've been listening to the Best Money Show on radio on Boston Herald Radio. The Money Show is sponsored in part by Buyers Brokers Only, LLC, Dream Smile Dental, and Poli Mortgage.
Because human genius has now destroyed the impediment of the terrestrial radio.
Boston Herald Radio.